Can police search your home without a warrant? What if they barge in, dig through your stuff, and find something that they think is incriminating? Can they use it against you in court? Now imagine this. You're sitting in your living room, minding your own business, when suddenly the door flies open. No knock, no warrant, just badges and boots in your home. This week, we're talking about your Fourth Amendment rights. Will they actually protect? How far the government can go? And what happens when those boundaries are crossed? If you think that could never happen to me, you better think again. There are many court cases that deal with this specific amendment. Because once they ignore the Constitution for one person, no one is safe. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Voices of Liberty. I'm so excited for y'all to be joining me for episode 7. We have gone through 3 amendments so far, and we're about to start the 4th one. But before we do, I want to go ahead and give y'all the weekly verse and challenge, just to encourage y'all and to start the episode off on a very positive note. And I want to start with the weekly verse, and the weekly verse this week says, "So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? For the pagans run after all of these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough troubles of its own." Matthew 6:31-34. The weekly challenge this week is Handwritten Notes Week. And essentially what I want y'all to do is just write a sweet note. Maybe it has scripture on it, or maybe it's just a simple "I love you," and hide it in special places for your children, spouse, or friends and family to find. I used to do this all the time for Shane, who's my husband, and he actually loved it. I would put it in the little coffee cabinet above his coffee maker, and when he would open it every morning, there would be a special note, and he would save every single one of them. I thought it was sweet that he saved them, and I think he thought it was really sweet that I wrote them. And sometimes I'll leave him some in his Bible as well. It's just an encourager and a reminder that I love him a lot and that the Lord is with him. The next thing I want to talk about before we really dig into this episode is letters to my sisters. And this is a new thing I'm doing in the email list, where essentially you can ask me a question and I will respond in a video answer. So I can't wait to see your questions. If you're on the email list, go ahead and make sure you click the little survey to submit your question, and I will hopefully be starting this up in May. So now that we have the weekly challenge and the weekly verse announced, I want to go ahead and refresh your memory on the amendments that we have already gone through. And the first one is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Third Amendment, no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house, without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by the law. So I go through these every time, essentially to just refresh your memory on these amendments so that you can have a better understanding, and that way you can begin to memorize them as we go through them. I think it's essential that we have these at the forefront of our minds. And so anytime you hear these at the beginning of the episode, really just try to memorize them. I think it'll be really beneficial. So now that we have all that covered, I want to go through the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, I know there is a lot in that amendment. So just take a breath for a second. Breathe. I promise I'm going to break it down for y'all. Essentially, I want y'all to understand that this amendment makes it clear that searches and seizures are forbidden. We got that. But what are the consequences when this right is violated? Does it say anything about that? When it comes to the Fourth Amendment, there are many court cases that I could refer to. However, for this episode, I'm only going to be talking about 2 of them that are major cases. But I want y'all to know that the government has overstepped a lot when it comes to this amendment, and it is shocking. After I briefly go through the history of why this amendment was created, I will dig into these 2 court cases I was talking about earlier. I want y'all to pause this episode and take a moment to see how the court should have ruled. So just take your best guess that you can and just see how you think the court should have ruled. And then unpause the episode to get your answer. And then I'll walk you through the court case. Before we do that, though, I want to go through the history behind the 4th Amendment. During colonial America, England imposed high taxes on colonists' goods. We talked about this earlier in the past episodes with the different laws that were passed, but they were being taxed at very high rates. Because of these high taxes, smuggling operations became very common, and John Hancock was actually a key smuggler during this time period. Just a little fun fact for you. To prevent smuggling operations from happening in the colonies, the English Parliament passed the Navigation Acts, or the Acts of Trade and Navigation, which were a long series of laws passed to regulate trade. To enforce these laws, the writs of assistance was pushed heavily by England. Okay, so what is the writs of assistance? What does that even mean? The writs of assistance basically gave permission for the British soldiers to inspect homes, businesses, and warehouses or ships. This gave the colonial British government the ability to search any place they suspected colonists were smuggling goods. However, the key difference is they did not need probable cause for a search warrant. If they thought someone was suspicious or breaking the law, the writs of assistance gave them permission to search the property. Great. This is clearly a violation of the colonists' rights, and I can't imagine just being in my house and a British soldier just comes and barges in and takes whatever he wants. A lawyer named James Otis, who is actually a friend of John Adams, challenged the Massachusetts Superior Court on the writs of assistance. Otis spoke passionately for 5 hours about how England had overstepped and crossed boundaries. Can you imagine giving a speech defending your case for 5 hours? That is crazy. Otis was very passionate about this, clearly. Okay, guys, we're going to hear from my friends from Back to the Basics 101. Back to the Basics 101 is a small business owned by Johnny and Ginger Butts. They are a farming family who are also believers. Basics, in their name, Back to the Basics 101, is an acronym for Brothers and Sisters in Christ Service. Ginger believes that when we're saved, discipled, and healthy, we can enjoy the abundant life Jesus talks about in John 10:10. Their family has experienced healing from what Ginger calls modern diseases through God's creation. Back to the Basics 101 produces 4 product lines to help consumers get nutrition from the source. Each of their product lines get you as close to the point of nutrition as possible. For instance, their homemade baking mixes are made from the wheat they grow in Middle Georgia. Ginger then takes the wheat to a miller who raises the gate to his pond, which activates the 4-foot stone mill that grinds the wheat berries into flour. She keeps the process primitive to ensure the consumer gets nutrients at their peak. Their other 3 product lines include a plant protein blend, elderberries and more ultimate syrup kit, and seasonings. I just want to say that every time I feel a cold coming on, I use Ginger's elderberry syrup kit, and it is so good. My mom always keeps it in the fridge, and if we ever feel a cold coming on, we will take the elderberry syrup. So good for you. Highly recommend. So go to backtothebasics101.com and use code CCW10 for 10% off your first order. Again, that's backtothebasics101.com, code CCW10 for 10% off your first order. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook to see all their small batch products to help make a healthier you. Otis was of the mindset that every man's home is his castle. And this term actually originated from the English judge Sir Edward Coke. Otis had a great reputation when it came to presenting cases. He was a very well-known lawyer for his time, and he was a really good friend of John Adams. But unfortunately, he did lose this case. British soldiers continued to search colonists' homes and push boundaries and violate their rights. This case actually played a key role in the lead up to the American Revolution, and Adams took great notes during this trial. Otis was elected to serve in the legislature to represent Boston. He also played key roles in the rising resistance to laws like the Stamp Act. We talked about that in previous episodes as well. The Stamp Act, remember, was an act that was passed by Parliament to essentially tax very high taxes on all paper goods. Unfortunately, a tax collector clubbed Otis in the head, causing severe brain damage. He was never mentally stable after this happened, and later on, he was unfortunately struck by lightning. Even though his life had a tragic ending, Adams ensured that Otis's legacy lived on. Here is a piece from John Adams' rendition of Otis's powerful speech. Remember, he spoke for 5 hours, and during this trial, John Adams was there, and he was trying to soak everything up and just write everything down he possibly could from Otis's 5-hour speech. And this is what it says. In the same manner I rely on it, that the writ prayed for in this petition, being general, is illegal. It is a power that places the liberty of every man in the hands of every petty officer. I say that I admit that special writs of assistance to search special places may be granted to certain person on oath, but I deny that the writ now prayed for can be granted. For I beg leave to make some observations on the writ itself, before I proceed to other acts of Parliament. In the first place, the writ is universal, being directed to all and singular justices, sheriffs, constables, and all other officers and subjects. So that, in short, it is directed to every subject in the king's dominions. Everyone with this writ may be a tyrant. If this commission be legal, a tyrant in a legal manner also may control, imprison, or murder anyone within the realm. In the next place, it is perpetual. There is no return. A man is accountable to no person for his doings. Every man may reign secure in his petty tyranny, and spread terror and desolation around him. In the third place, a person with this writ in the daytime may enter all houses, shops, etc. at will and command to assist him. Fourthly, by this writ, not only deputies, etc., but even their menial servants are allowed to lord it over us. Now, one of the most essential branches of English liberty is the freedom of one's house. A man's house is his castle, and while he is quiet, he is as well guarded as a prince in his castle. This writ, if it should be declared legal, would totally annihilate this privilege. So this quote is from teachingamericanhistory.org. And remember, this is everything that Otis was speaking during this trial. John Adams was taking it and just jotting everything down that he possibly could and putting it into his own words. But we can get a gist for what Otis was trying to say. And I know that this quote is a lot. There's a lot of information in this. But I want to reread the last part again, because it is just such a profound statement. A man's house is his castle, and while he is quiet, he is as well guarded as a prince in his castle. This writ, if it should be declared legal, would totally annihilate this privilege. Otis was very adamant that he was not in favor of the writs of assistance. He was not in favor of the British soldiers being able to just barge into colonists' homes without a warrant and search and take things that weren't theirs. This was very, very important to the colonists and to these men who were defending this. I wish people taught like this today, because this is such a profound statement, and I would just love to be a fly on the wall in that courtroom and just hearing Otis speak for, I know it's a long time, but for 5 hours, because yes, he was passionate about this. This meant a lot to him, and he understood the depth and the weight of what something like this could do. So even though he lost his court case, this set the tone for the American Revolution. And like I said earlier, Adams ensured that Otis's legacy lived on. He took all of these wonderful notes, and now we're able to read them and have them today. So now that we have all that settled, I want to kind of go into the court case of Weeks versus United States. No matter how you feel about the situation, we can all probably agree that police just searching your home without a warrant is wrong. Imagine being at home and the police were just to bust in on you while you're eating dinner with your family. They ransack your home, leave a mess, and if they were to find evidence of a crime, then what? While it seems like this would never happen, let me tell you it has. The first case I want to mention is Weeks versus the United States. This case actually takes place in Kansas City, Missouri in 1911, and a man named Fremont Weeks had been sending lottery tickets in the mail illegally. This was a crime back then, and using the U.S. Postal Service to send lottery tickets was a criminal offense. Police took matters into their own hands, and they decided to enter his home to find evidence, without a search warrant, of course. Police did this when Weeks was out. He was at work, actually, and they asked a neighbor where Weeks kept his spare key and went into his home. We took documents and lottery tickets as evidence, and Weeks was charged and arrested at his workplace. So I want y'all to pause for a second and just think about this. The police went into Weeks' home because they suspected him to be selling lottery tickets illegally through the mail. But they didn't have a warrant to do this. They asked the neighbor for his spare key, barged into his house while he was away, took the evidence they needed, and left. Okay, how do you think the court should have ruled in this case? Even though Weeks was clearly committing a crime, how do you think the court should have ruled? Weeks requested that his documents be returned to him as they did not have the right to take them. This case actually went to the district court, and the jury convicted Weeks of being guilty. And they used the evidence to do this that was found in his home. He obviously appealed this to the Supreme Court under unlawful search and seizures under the Fourth Amendment, and they heard his case in 1913. The Supreme Court ruled that the officers had no right to enter into his home without a warrant. The Supreme Court ordered that all evidence found in the unlawful search be given back to Weeks and ruled in favor of Weeks. The Supreme Court overturned the district court's decision, and I want to read you a section from this article. And this case actually played a huge impact in other cases like this. It really set the tone for cases dealing with the Fourth Amendment. Here's a section from judiciallearningcenter.org, and it says, "The judgment of the district court was reversed. The evidence collected during the illegal search was in violation of the Fourth Amendment and was thus inadmissible at the trial. In a criminal investigation, in order for a search to be legal, there must be probable cause. The probable cause must be used to gain a search warrant. If not, the search will be illegal, and the evidence collected as a result of the search cannot be used in court. The Weeks decision was the birth of a new legal doctrine, the exclusionary rule." Okay, so you may be wondering, what is the exclusionary rule? What does that even mean? Essentially, the exclusionary rule just means that if the evidence was obtained by violating the Fourth Amendment, then this evidence cannot be used in a court of law. This rule is not actually applied to every case, as every situation dealing with the Fourth Amendment is different, but it is a rule that the Supreme Court will have at the back of their minds when deciding cases like this. When it came to Weeks versus United States, basically the Supreme Court said, okay, well, all of this evidence that you found in Weeks' home unlawfully that you did not have a warrant to get cannot be used in court. You have to essentially disregard all of that evidence. So the next case I want to talk about is a lot more advanced, and I'm going to be reading a lot of it from oyez.com because there's just so much that goes into this court case. But it's called Abel versus United States. And this case, again, is a lot more detailed, and it may be harder for y'all to guess how the Supreme Court may have ruled on this one. There was a man named Rudolph Abel, and he was an artist and living in a hotel room in Brooklyn, New York, in the 1950s. The FBI suspected him of being a spy for the Soviet Union, and they suspected him to also be in the U.S. illegally. I want to read the facts of this case, again from oyez.com, and it says, Rudolph Abel maintained an artist studio in Brooklyn Heights, New York, while living in New York at various inexpensive lodgings. In early May of 1957, Reino Hanahan informed the American Embassy in Paris that he had been acting as a secret agent for the Soviet Union in the United States since 1952. He also informed the embassy that he had assisted a Soviet agent he only knew as Mark, whom he identified as a resident agent in the United States with the military rank of a colonel. FBI agents began a long investigation of Abel, but did not seek to obtain a warrant of arrest or search warrant relating to Abel. FBI agents gave 3 agents from the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which is called the INS, a report on Abel as a suspected spy. The FBI agents also asked them to prepare an immigration detention warrant. On June 21st, 1957, the FBI agents found Abel at the Latham Hotel in Manhattan and questioned him unsuccessfully for half an hour. A short time after, the INS agents who were waiting outside packed all of Abel's personal effects in the room. They seized over 200 items but found no weapons or evidence of alienage. The FBI also seized several items after an agent checked Abel out of the hotel, including 3 items contested at trial. 2 INS agents flew Abel to a maximum security camp in McAllen, Texas, where FBI and INS agents interrogated him for 4 weeks. On the 3rd day, he admitted he was in the United States illegally. A criminal warrant for Abel's arrest was issued on August 7, 1957, and while Abel was in his Texas cell, he also learned the same day that he was indicted for espionage. Agents brought Abel back to New York, where the district court tried and convicted him of espionage. The prosecution introduced 7 items seized before the government obtained a search warrant. Okay, so with all of that information, I want to kind of give it a little bit of a recap because there was a lot in that. So there was a man named, we'll call him Abel, Rudolph Abel, and essentially he was in the U.S. illegally, and he was a spy for the Soviet Union, and he was going undercover as the name Mark. And the FBI was tipped about him, and so essentially they began to investigate him, and they did search his home without a warrant, and they began to obviously interrogate him, and they interrogated him for 4 weeks after they had him into custody. But I want y'all to think about this for a second and think, is this a violation of his constitutional rights? Is this a violation of Abel's constitutional rights? Should the Supreme Court rule in favor of Abel or not? So I want y'all to pause and think about it for a second. Okay, y'all, let me tell you about my friends at 7 Weeks Coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to fund the pro-life movement 1 cup of coffee at a time. Why are they called 7 Weeks Coffee? Because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a little coffee bean, and it's the same time a heartbeat is clearly detected on an ultrasound. That is why they donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy care centers across the country. They have raised over $800,000 for these centers and have saved thousands of lives. Now, let me tell you about the coffee because I am very picky about what I put into my body. It's mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, and low-acid, and it's organically farmed. It truly checks all the boxes. So go to 7weekscoffee.com and save 15% forever when you subscribe. Plus, exclusively for my listeners, use the code OFFICIALCCW for an extra 10% off your first order. That's a 25% total savings on your first order. Remember, your order will directly help support a network of over 1,000 pro-life organizations across the U.S. But here's the answer. Yes. In a 5-4 decision written by Justice Felix Frankfurter, the court held that the INS properly arrested Abel even though the FBI suspected him of espionage. Justice Frankfurter also held that the items seized by both the INS and the FBI were properly introduced into evidence at trial. He could discern no constitutional reason to limit the search for materials proving the deportability of a validly arrested alien more than the Constitution limits the search for materials probative of a crime. Noting that the INS agents had to apply the district director of the INS for a warrant, Justice Frankfurter argued that the differences in the procedural protection between criminal and deportation arrests were not of a constitutional significance. Again, there's a lot in that. But essentially, it was a 5-4 ruling, and they basically ruled against Abel. But another case I want to talk about is more recent, and it's the raid on Mar-a-Lago, which is Trump's Florida estate. So I remember when this happened actually on TV, and I remember just standing there with my mouth open. Like, the FBI literally just raided his home. A previous president. And I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. But I did some digging, and here is the facts. Yes, the FBI did have a warrant to search Trump's home. This actually caused a lot of controversy within the conservative community, but they did have a warrant to search his home. But many people, again, questioned the way it was executed. Why that timing? Why that method? by that level of force. This is what Melania Trump had to say about it. I never imagined my privacy would be invaded by the government here in America. This serves as a warning to all Americans. Trump also said, they go into her closet, they go through her dresses, and it wasn't left the way that they found it. I can imagine just being at home and just having an evening together, and then the FBI just raids my home and ransacks the place. Agree or disagree with him politically, it has raised many red flags. If a former president's home can be searched so aggressively, what does that say about the rest of us? Alright, y'all, let me talk about my friends at Conviction Co. Conviction Co. is a family-owned business started by a Midwest stay-at-home mom. Their goal is to provide their customers with high-quality and on-trend apparel and accessories that make it easy to boldly share truth and spark important conversations. I actually own 2 of their hats. They're the trucker hats, and I have one that says One Nation Under God and a Make America Healthy Again hat. They are truly such good quality. I was so impressed when I ordered them and got them in the mail. I actually got them earlier than I was anticipating, and they really catch people's attention. I get so many compliments on these hats. I had my husband trying them on, my dad trying them on, even my grandma bought a hat. That just shows how they really, really speak to people. So go to convictionco.com and use code officialccw today to get 10% off your order. Again, that's convictionco.com, code officialccw to get 10% off your order today. The Fourth Amendment was born out of a deep mistrust of government overreach. It was written by people who lived through invasive and abusive searches. People who knew that unchecked power is always dangerous. From colonial raids to Soviet spy hunts to modern political trauma, one truth remains. If the government can come for one person's home, they can come for yours too. Our founding fathers gave us the blueprint for freedom, but it's up to us to protect it, not just in courtrooms, but in our conversations, our votes, and by our vigilance. So next time you hear someone say, if you've got nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about, you'll know exactly why the Fourth Amendment matters. Remember these cases, and remember, every man's home is his castle. Hopefully by going through these amendments, it will just help you better navigate life with liberty, truth, and grace. If y'all love this episode, I just ask that y'all share it with one friend. If you send your proof to voicesoflibertycontact@gmail.com, I will give you a shout out on the podcast. And I'll also send you an exclusive CCW sticker in the mail while supplies last. If you feel led to leave a review, please make sure you do. And make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss next week's episode as we dive into the Fifth Amendment. And yes, that is the one about due process and self-incrimination. Knowing these amendments and the history is the framework for everything else. My goal is to obviously cover topics of today. I love looking at trending news topics, and I just have been dying to cover it. But for right now, I want to make sure that we understand the basics. This is the framework for everything else, y'all. We have to understand the politics of yesterday before we can begin to understand the politics of today. Understanding these amendments is only going to help us better grasp the topics that are going on today. I want y'all to stay grounded, stay bold, and never forget that your rights matter because you matter. Continue to navigate life with liberty, truth, and grace.